Before the drugs, before the rap scene, before the Motor City became a symbol of decline and rebirth, Detroit was a battlefield. A war most Americans never heard about. A war fought not over ideology, but over control. Control of money, of loyalty, of bloodlines. This is the forgotten Mafia War of Detroit, a hidden chapter in American history that shaped the city long before the auto plants, long before Motown, long before Eminem ever picked up a mic. So if you're fascinated by real crime, real power, and the ghosts of cities that built America, hit subscribe. Because today, we're stepping inside Detroit's blood-soaked history to uncover how one family kept the Mafia alive longer than almost anyone else in America. The story begins in the 1920s. Detroit was booming. Henry Ford's factories were hiring tens of thousands. Immigrants from Italy, Sicily, Poland, and Ireland poured in, chasing paychecks, chasing the American dream. But dreams weren't always made in daylight. In Detroit's Italian neighborhoods, especially around Hastings Street and Eastern Market, another economy was rising: liquor, gambling, extortion. Prohibition made booze illegal, but for men like Angelo Maley, William Black Bill Tocco, and Joseph Joe Uno Zerilli, they made them kings. They weren't flashy. They weren't like Al Capone in Chicago, who loved attention. Detroit's mob was quieter, smarter. They didn't shoot unless they had to, and they almost always got away with it when they did. By 1925, they'd formed what the FBI later called the Detroit Partnership, a criminal organization so disciplined it would survive nearly a century without collapsing from the inside. But before that could happen, Detroit would bleed. The 1930s weren't kind to mobsters. New York's crime families were already at war, the infamous Castellamar's War that gave birth to Lucky Luciano's Commission. And that war didn't stay in New York. In Detroit, rival factions were already circling. On one side, the East Side Gang, made up mostly of Sicilian bootleggers. On the other, the West Side Gang, dominated by Calabrians and Neapolitans who refused to take orders from Sicilian bosses. Between 1930 and 1932, Detroit's streets turned into open combat zones. Cars torched, bodies found in the river, men gunned down in broad daylight. At the heart of it all was Angelo Maley, a quiet tactician who managed to unify Detroit's crime under one banner, the Partnership. He brokered peace between factions, convincing them they could make far more money working together than dying apart. His philosophy was simple: keep the peace, control the streets, never outshine Chicago. And that's what kept Detroit's Mafia alive when so many others self-destructed. You see, Chicago's outfit didn't like competition. Al Capone and later Sam Giancana viewed Detroit as an extension of their territory. But Detroit didn't play that game. By the 1940s, Joe Zerilli, Maley's brother-in-law, was running the show. He built alliances through marriage, through business, through silence. While Chicago was drawing blood, Zerilli was drawing contracts. The Detroit mob invested in car dealerships, trucking companies, and even legitimate auto parts suppliers. They laundered millions through the Motor City economy while the FBI chased ghosts. And that's what made them dangerous. They weren't loud. They were invisible. In one FBI report, an agent wrote, "The Detroit family is the most organized, least flamboyant, and most enduring crime group in the Midwest." Translation: they were professionals. The 1950s brought a new kind of power struggle, less about bullets, more about unions. The Teamsters Union, led by Jimmy Hoffa, became a gold mine for the Mafia. And guess where Hoffa was from? Detroit. The Partnership and Hoffa's Teamsters became entwined. Mobsters used pension funds to finance casinos in Las Vegas and Miami. Millions disappeared, and nobody said a word. Even when the FBI started wiretapping, Detroit's mob kept its cool. They didn't speak on phones. They met in parks, in funeral homes, in car lots. They had a code, and if someone broke it, well, let's just say Lake St. Clair got another missing person. By the 1970s, new players wanted in. Drug dealers, street gangs, and out-of-town crews saw Detroit as ripe for the taking. But the old Mafia didn't share. The murder of Anthony Giacalone's associate in 1975 sparked what locals quietly called the Quiet War. No headlines, no shootouts in the open, just disappearances. One of those disappearances was Jimmy Hoffa. Many believe the Detroit mob, specifically Tony Giacalone and Tony Tonjak Giacalone, arranged his final meeting. He vanished from a restaurant parking lot. No body ever found, no conviction ever made. But to this day, most investigators agree. If Hoffa's gone, Detroit made the call. And after that, no one ever challenged the partnership again. By the 1990s, Detroit's underworld looked different. Drugs had replaced gambling, street gangs replaced old-school crews. But the partnership didn't vanish. They adapted. Real estate, construction, waste management, even politics. While other mob families crumbled under indictments, Detroit quietly endured. The Tocco's Zerilli bloodline still influenced the city's shadows into the 2000s. They even had legitimate business owners unknowingly washing mob money through construction contracts and bar ownerships. The difference? They didn't need to pull triggers anymore. They just pulled strings. But there's a darker side to all this order. Detroit's Mafia may have kept peace, but it came at a cost. People disappeared. Families never got answers. And an entire generation grew up in a city haunted by invisible power. Today, Detroit is reborn in many ways. Tech startups, art scenes, music, revitalization. But the ghosts of the partnership remain. Old warehouses, abandoned lots, whispers about who really runs what. Because power, once earned, rarely disappears. It just changes form. So why does this story matter? Because the Detroit Mafia isn't just a crime story. It's a mirror, a reflection of how ambition, loyalty, and greed can build empires and destroy them. The old mobsters are gone now, but the systems they built, the unions, the shell companies, the shadow networks, those still exist. They just wear suits instead of fedoras. And maybe that's the real lesson of Detroit's forgotten Mafia war. That the line between crime and capitalism was never as clean as we'd like to believe. If you enjoyed this dive into America's hidden history, make sure to subscribe for more untold stories about power, corruption, and the human cost of ambition. Because sometimes the truth sounds more like fiction than we'd ever want to admit.